Boska shock request, Mera Role, Uska husband. I still can't believe she actually said it out loud. The words are stuck in my head, like the kind of echo you can't shake. The ones that make your chest feel too tight and your palms suddenly sweaty. And the worst, or maybe the best, part is, she wasn't even joking. I was leaning over the service counter at the repair shop, my hands greasy from a busted air conditioner unit. The fluorescent lights flickered above, buzzing faintly, mixing with the low hum of the machines. And then she walked in a blazer that didn't quite match her age, but somehow fit her presence. Hair pulled back loosely, a few strands framing her face like they were placed there on purpose. Confident, sharp, maybe even a little untouchable. I've worked here for a year, seen hundreds of clients. But something about her, maybe it was the way she moved through the room like she owned it without demanding it, made the air feel heavier. She looked at the forms on my counter, frowned at a receipt I hadn't noticed. "You've made a mistake here," she said softly, tilting her head. Just that tilt, that calm certainty. I fumbled for a pen, tried to fix it without looking up, but my hands felt clumsy. "You're quick to notice," I said, though it came out more like a question than a compliment. She glanced at me then, and I swear, just for a second, the world narrowed down to those hazel eyes. Not warm, not cold, but sharp enough to make me self-conscious, aware of every twitch and hesitation. Then she smiled, a slight, almost invisible curl of her lips. Kindness there, but with an edge, like she knew something I didn't. I wanted to look away. I wanted to get back to paperwork, to greasy tools, to anything else that wouldn't make my heartbeat spike. But I couldn't. There was a pause, just a breath, while she leaned on the counter, tapping her fingers lightly. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, something earthy, understated. I noticed the subtle crease of her wristwatch, the way the light caught her rings. Details that shouldn't matter, but somehow did. She didn't say anything more, and the silence stretched long enough that it almost felt intentional, like a quiet dare. Then she said it. About the request. About me playing a role I couldn't even imagine. Her voice was calm, but underneath, a flicker of amusement, or was it curiosity, made the words pulse in my head. I nodded, though I had no clue what I was agreeing to. Part of me wanted to ask why. Another part couldn't stop wondering how her eyes would look when she laughed at the idea, or when she wasn't laughing at all. She turned to leave, just like that, and I caught a glimpse of her hand brushing against the edge of the counter. A small, meaningless gesture, except my chest twisted in a way I didn't expect. I kept staring at the space she'd vacated, replaying the tilt of her head, the pause of her smile, the soft authority in the way she moved. And I couldn't stop thinking about that moment, the 1 second of quiet electricity between us. How a simple glance could feel like it left fingerprints on my mind, sticky and unshakable. That small, almost insignificant act of hers, it stayed with me. Longer than it should have. Even now, I wonder if she knows. If she knows what a storm she leaves behind with just a tilt of her head, a quiet word, a casual smile. I doubt it, but I can't stop thinking about it. Not for a second. The next time I saw her, it was in the hotel lobby, papers spread across a small table. She was trying to organize some invoices, the heels of her shoes tapping faintly against the marble floor. I'd been sent to help carry boxes, though I quickly realized my role wasn't physical. It was just being there, quiet, patient, invisible in the corners where she might notice me. She didn't look up when I set the first box down, fingers brushing the edge of the table as she shuffled through the receipts. I watched her for a moment, how her shoulders stiffened when someone passed too close, how the faint crease between her brows deepened whenever she focused. Everything about her seemed poised, but I could see the strain underneath. Tired eyes, faint shadow lines, the way she exhaled sharply and rubbed the side of her neck. "Did you bring the other set of files?" she asked, voice soft but clipped. A little hesitantly, as if she didn't fully want to ask. I handed them over, careful not to touch her papers. Her hands, when they brushed mine briefly, were warm but strong, deliberate. I noticed the subtle way her fingers lingered on the paper longer than necessary, like she was trying to anchor herself. She finally looked up at me, and for a heartbeat, I saw the mask slip. A small flicker of exhaustion, maybe even regret. She pressed her lips together, looked away quickly, and cleared her throat. But I saw it. A vulnerability she didn't intend to show. I wanted to say something, something light, gentle, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I smiled faintly, hoping it was enough. She didn't smile back, not immediately, but there was a flicker, a soft twitch at the corner of her mouth, almost imperceptible. As we worked together in silence, I noticed little things. How she tucked stray hairs behind her ears. How her laugh sometimes came out softer than she expected when the hotel staff made a joke. How the faint tremor in her hands betrayed her fatigue, even though her posture remained proud. She handed me a stack of receipts and paused, thumb brushing over the edge of the paper. "Thanks," she said, almost inaudible, like she was afraid I wouldn't hear the sincerity behind the word. That pause, the tiny, unguarded gesture, made me aware of everything I'd noticed in her. The careful control, the small cracks in it, the energy that somehow pulled me in. I kept my distance, but the silence between us was thick, charged. Her glance lingered a moment too long as she gathered the papers, and I realized I was holding my breath, waiting for something I couldn't name. Then she straightened suddenly, smoothing the crease of her blouse, letting a stray sigh escape without meaning to. And I saw it. Just for a second, the tension in her jaw, the faint flutter in her eyes. A vulnerability she couldn't entirely hide, yet tried desperately to. And in that moment, I felt the pull again, quiet but undeniable, like gravity had shifted just for the two of us. I couldn't look away, and neither could she, not completely. And as she handed me another file, our fingers brushed again, lingering this time. Just enough to leave a spark. The rain started softly, then harder, drumming against the glass walls of the repair shop. She and I were the only ones left, stacking old boxes in the storage corner. The fluorescent lights cast a pale glow, turning the space quiet except for the rain and our breathing. I could feel the warmth of her shoulder brushing against mine as we shifted a box together, and for a moment, I forgot where I was supposed to be, what was appropriate, what wasn't. She let out a small sigh, the kind that seems to carry more than just tiredness, and I glanced at her. She caught my look, but didn't flinch, just tilted her head slightly, as if daring me to ask something I wasn't supposed to. I wanted to say it. Something that would break the distance between us, make the air less charged and more honest. But I didn't. My voice caught, and I swallowed it down, focusing instead on the box in front of us, the rain streaking the glass, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Then her phone buzzed sharply. She glanced at it, eyes tightening for a fraction of a second before she silenced it. A message from someone I didn't know, maybe a friend, maybe an ex. She pressed her lips together, glanced at me briefly, and shook her head. I didn't ask. I couldn't. The moment felt fragile, and I didn't want to ruin it with words. We moved to the next stack of boxes, and I felt the brush of her hand against mine again, accidental, or maybe not. I couldn't tell. My heart thumped harder than it should, and I had to remind myself to breathe, to stay steady, to act like I wasn't aware of every detail. The way her hair fell across her shoulder, the faint tremble in her fingers, the way she sometimes bit the inside of her cheek when she was nervous. She laughed softly at something I said, just a quiet exhale of sound, and I noticed the small crinkle at the corner of her eyes. It made me ache, like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't step over, a line I wasn't allowed to cross. "Careful," she said, moving a box slightly closer to me, the space between us shrinking just enough for the warmth of her jacket to brush my sleeve. Her voice was low, almost vulnerable, and my chest tightened. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to tell her she didn't have to pretend everything was fine. But I didn't. Not yet. The rain outside grew louder, the wind rattling the windows. I could feel the tension thickening, the electricity between us sparking quietly. And just as I thought I might lean in, say something I shouldn't, our shared silence was broken by the sharp clang of the front door opening. A colleague, back from an errand, looked at us and cleared his throat. We both jumped slightly, the moment evaporating. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how close we had been, how close I wanted to be. She straightened, smoothing her blouse, glancing away, and I had to remind myself to stop staring at her hands, at the way the light caught her hair. And yet, even as I pulled away, I couldn't stop thinking about that space we'd shared, the brush of warmth, the quiet electricity, how it felt like we almost crossed a line, but didn't. Not yet. The office was empty, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. She was perched on the edge of a chair, arms crossed, staring at the stack of papers I'd been organizing. I leaned against the desk, pretending to sort through files, though my eyes kept drifting to her. The air between us had shifted, heavier, impossible to ignore. She exhaled, slow, deliberate. "Do you ever wonder what we're even doing?" Her voice was soft, almost fragile, and it pierced through the quiet like a needle. I froze for a moment, unsure if I was allowed to answer. It wasn't about the work anymore, not really. My chest tightened. "I think about it," I admitted quietly. Her gaze met mine, steady, unwavering. There was no deflection, no mask, just raw honesty, and suddenly I felt naked in front of her. Because this isn't normal. We can't pretend it is. I swallowed, my throat dry. The words were so simple, but they carried weight. Everything we'd been dancing around, the glances, the silences, the brush of our hands, suddenly felt amplified, impossible to ignore. She leaned back, running a hand through her hair, then letting it fall loosely again. "I don't even know what I want anymore," she whispered, voice cracking slightly. "Or who I'm supposed to be when I'm around you." The quiet between us was heavy, each second stretching long enough that it became almost unbearable. I wanted to reach out, to say something that would make it better, or at least make sense. But I didn't. Words felt useless, clumsy. Instead, I just watched. Watched the way her shoulders slumped slightly, the subtle tremor in her hands, the tiny sigh she couldn't hold back. I noticed the faint shadow beneath her eyes, the way the sunlight hit the curve of her jaw, the almost imperceptible pause before she spoke. Every detail pressed against my chest like it was carving into me. She looked at me again, and for the first time, there was no playful tilt in her expression, no teasing flicker behind her eyes. Just truth. Honest, raw, and unyielding. "What happens now?" she asked, barely audible. But the question hung in the room, heavier than any storm. I couldn't answer. I didn't even know if I wanted to. Because saying anything would mean stepping closer to something we weren't ready for, or pulling back from something we couldn't deny. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, chin resting on her hands. Her voice dropped to a whisper, fragile and breaking. "I feel like I'm losing myself in all of this, and I don't even know if it's mine to lose." The words landed in my chest, sinking deep. I could feel the weight of every pause, every unspoken thought between us. Silence had never spoken louder. And in that quiet, I realized we had already crossed a line, one we couldn't go back from. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I only watched her, heart hammering, knowing that nothing would ever feel the same again. It started with a box she'd brought from the back office, something she'd almost forgotten was there. She set it down with a soft thud, and the corners of her mouth tightened. Not the sharp, confident line I was used to, but something fragile, tentative. I haven't looked at these in years," she said quietly, almost to herself. I didn't move, just watched her, sensing the weight in her words before I could even understand what it meant. Inside the box were photographs, letters, and a faded voicemail printout. I noticed how her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pictures, black and white memories of a younger version of herself, smiling at someone I didn't know. Her eyes softened, glossing over as she traced the edges of a photo with her thumb. I lost him," she whispered, voice breaking, and I realized she meant someone deeply, irreparably gone. A quiet ache settled over the room. She didn't need to explain. The grief was already there, tangible, pressing against the space between us. I wanted to reach out, to say something comforting, but my instinct to stay silent was stronger. Some moments aren't for words. I simply watched, memorizing the way her shoulders slumped, the faint quiver in her lips, the way her eyes flickered with something she wasn't ready to name. Then, almost without thinking, I picked up one of the letters she'd been holding. It was addressed to her, written in a familiar, looping handwriting. "You always said you'd wait," I read softly, barely above a whisper. She flinched, a tiny gasp escaping her chest, and I could feel the sharp sting of something long buried. Her laugh came out, quiet, nervous, almost disbelieving. I wasn't ready to let it go," she admitted. "I thought I had, but seeing this, it's like it never left." Her voice cracked, fragile and real. I didn't try to console her with cliches. Instead, I let the silence stretch, heavy but safe. And in that quiet, I noticed things that didn't need words. The way she hugged the letter to her chest, the faint pressure of her fingers against the edge of the photo, the tiny sigh that escaped her lips when she realized she wasn't alone anymore. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting second, unguarded, raw. Something passed between us, an acknowledgement that we were standing on the edge of something fragile and precious, something that could shift everything without a single dramatic gesture. And then she smiled, just a little, the first real smile I'd seen all day, and my chest twisted in a way I didn't expect. It was small, quiet, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I realized, in that moment, that she had just shown me a part of herself no one else had touched in years. And I didn't need to say anything. We didn't move, didn't reach out. We just stayed there, suspended in a space where loss and trust collided, feeling the seismic pull of something neither of us could name yet. She leaned back slightly, closing her eyes for a moment, and I couldn't stop staring. The room felt heavier, softer, charged with the weight of her confession, and the knowledge that everything between us had just shifted. The office was quiet, unusually quiet for the end of the day. Papers had been stacked, files put away, and the hum of the lights above seemed softer somehow. She was sitting at the edge of the couch, legs crossed, staring out the window at the dim glow of the streetlights. I stayed standing for a moment, unsure if I should move, unsure if this was the kind of silence that demanded words, or the kind that demanded presence. She glanced at me briefly, then looked away, but not before I caught the faintest crack in her composure. Something had shifted, something unspoken that had been building between us for months, delicate as glass, but impossible to ignore. "I don't know how this happened," she said quietly, almost to herself. Her voice was calm, but heavy with everything she hadn't said. The tension, the longing, the quiet awareness that we'd crossed some invisible line. I took a slow step closer. "Neither do I admitted softly. "But I feel it too." The words were simple, honest. No grand declarations, no dramatic gestures. Just the truth between us, fragile and raw. She tilted her head, studying me for a long moment. Her fingers rested loosely on her lap, and I noticed how she kept brushing at the edge of her sleeve. An unconscious gesture, small and human. I realized then that she wasn't trying to hide anything from me. She was just cautious, gentle, letting the moment find its own pace. I sat down next to her, close but not intruding. Our shoulders brushed lightly, and it was enough. Enough to feel the warmth. Enough to feel that unspoken connection. She didn't move away. She let her hand rest near mine, fingertips almost touching. I hesitated, then shifted slightly, letting our hands meet in the smallest, quietest touch. The contact wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was acknowledgement, acceptance, a mutual understanding that whatever this was, it was real, and it was theirs, and they didn't have to name it to know it mattered. We sat there, side by side, breathing in the same rhythm, letting the silence carry the weight of everything we hadn't dared to say aloud. Months of stolen glances, near confessions, tension that had sometimes threatened to unravel us. It all condensed into this simple, quiet moment. Her head tilted just slightly, brushing the edge of my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't speak. It didn't need words. The space between us was full enough, charged enough, warm enough. And in that quiet, I realized something. This wasn't a love born of fireworks or sudden realization. It was slower, harder-earned, human, and inevitable. She exhaled, soft, almost imperceptible, and I felt the weight of every moment leading to this. The unspoken truths, the hesitations, the shared vulnerabilities, they had all built to this simple, undeniable truth. We didn't look at each other. We didn't need to. The touch of our hands, the brush of her head against my shoulder, the shared quiet, it said everything. And for the first time in months, maybe years, it felt like we could finally just be here. Together. Looking back, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment everything changed. Not because it was sudden, but because it wasn't. It was in the small things. The way she let her guard slip for a second. The way I learned to sit quietly without needing to fix anything. The way silence became something we could share without discomfort. She isn't the same woman I first met, and I'm not the same man I thought I was. She's softer in some ways, more willing to let someone in, yet still sharp and confident in ways that make it impossible to forget her. And me? I've learned that patience, attention, and presence can carry more weight than bold gestures or grand declarations. That love isn't always about fireworks. It can be the slow, quiet understanding that grows between two people over time. We both changed. She let herself feel, even when it was scary. I learned to notice, to respect the spaces where vulnerability hid. And together, we created something that wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Something earned, slow-burned, real. Looking at her now, I can still feel that pull, the subtle electricity, the gentle tension that never fully disappears. But it's no longer confusing. It's grounding. It's familiarity that feels like home without needing to say the words aloud. Sometimes I catch myself smiling at a memory, her laugh over a misplaced stack of papers, the way her hand brushed mine, the quiet afternoons when just being near her felt like everything I needed. Those moments weren't dramatic, but they were everything. And they're ours, layered into the rhythm of ordinary days that somehow feel extraordinary because we share them. This story isn't about a perfect ending or a fairy tale romance. It's about noticing, learning, and leaning into something that feels inevitable once you've allowed yourself to be truly present. It's about the way connection can grow quietly, stubbornly, until it becomes undeniable. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?